As we welcome into the program, NHL Insider, TSN Hockey Insider, one half of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, Mr. Darren Dreger, back here on Sekeres and Price. 6 days ago, Dregs, we talked about the big news. Alvin's sending a memo to his colleagues, general managers across the National Hockey League, saying they are open to trading veterans and UFAs. A week later, where's the smoke? How did it land with his colleagues?
Well, I mean, it encouraged conversations and discussions, and I think that would be the point of Patrick Allvin and the Vancouver Canucks and how they position the availability of their pending unrestricted free agents. But they're just discussions at this point. And the messaging that I'm getting is that, look, we, being the Canucks, are not in a great spot, but we're certainly not in a spot where we feel that we need to force anything. So this is getting that list out there early, seeing what the response is from the other 31 clubs across the National Hockey League, and then again, sparking dialogue and conversation. So by all accounts, it was a worthwhile exercise. Why not if you're Patrick Allvin, right? Put it out there and then see what comes back. But it doesn't mean that a week later, because there have been no trades, that was a bad idea. It did encourage some back and forth among the NHL teams.
Is there a team, Jimmy Rutherford has often been like this in his days, Carolina, yes. Pittsburgh, Vancouver. Is there a team out there that's hot to trot, Dregs, that is looking to add sooner rather than later?
I don't know that I would describe any one team as hot to trot. I mean, Vancouver would be one. Vancouver might be near the top of the list, primarily because of the injury bug and everything that they've had to contend with. And the fact that, look, I mean, the desire in Vancouver is to stay competitive and stay in the mix for that playoff spot. Over on the eastern side, I would look at the Montreal Canadiens. They've dabbled a little bit, using waivers and other tactics to at least bring in some depth pieces. But that's not what Quinn Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens are willing to settle with. And so, again, the notables that we looked at last week are the notables that we're going to continue to chew on here for days, if not weeks, moving forward. And the most attractive out of Vancouver is Kiefer Sherwood at the moment. That can change in time here. And I'm reading and I'm seeing the speculation as to what the rate of return is going to be for Kiefer Sherwood. And frankly, it's too soon to say that. I mean, what we know is obvious, and that's the Vancouver Canucks need players. They need players. Traditionally, when you're moving out a player of this magnitude, and I think that Kiefer Sherwood is in the upper echelon when you look at pending unrestricted free agents. Normally, if we're a month, 3 weeks, 2 weeks outside of the trade deadline, sure, we're talking about the usual package, which often includes a first-round draft pick and a prospect or a young NHL player. Which of those things helps the Vancouver Canucks, right? I mean, everybody wants a first-round draft pick because, if you don't see the benefit of holding on to that pick, well, a first-round draft pick is currency to get you in another trade scenario in the not-too-distant future. So I'm not dismissing that. But what I'm saying is if the Vancouver Canucks are going to trade Kiefer Sherwood, well in advance of the midpoint of the regular season, it's got to be for a piece that's coming back or pieces that are going to help them on the ice now. So that's just not there. I keep looking at Montreal to answer your question because I do know that Hughes is one of those teams that most definitely is continually kicking tires on the potential of a fit with St. Louis and some of the assets that they have up front, guys with a bit of experience, but still fit in the age dynamic that Montreal is looking to build on. So maybe there's something there between the Canucks and the Habs.
Sherwood is an interesting player because he's got decent counting stats now after this fabulous start to the season. And with his cap hit, he's eminently fittable pretty much in 31 other markets. Really, like you don't need to discern. I guess I'm just kind of wondering what the profile is of the acquiring team that's going to separate themselves. Because again, everybody could kind of do with a Kiefer Sherwood. But who ultimately pulls the trigger on that? And is it as a pure rental, or is somebody bringing in Sherwood to get the leg up to acquire him for the extension?
Well, that makes the most sense to me, because again, the Vancouver Canucks aren't going to trade Kiefer Sherwood unless they get a valued package, a valued return that's going to help them. So, if you're a team that likes the look of Sherwood, and for whatever reason, well, for a lot of reasons, San Jose comes to mind. And I'm not saying that, there's conversation happening between Mike Greer and Patrick Golfley. I'd be surprised if the Sharks haven't kicked some tires, because in the future, you see nothing but cap space in San Jose. And we had this discussion before going to air here. Kiefer Sherwood deserves to get paid. He deserves to get paid at this stage of his career, his age, all of those things. He needs to hit the home run, and his play on the ice is dictating he's going to put himself in a real nice spot. Well, the San Jose Sharks are going to have that financial wherewithal, right? They are. Some look at the Philadelphia Flyers and go, hey, you know what? Philadelphia is going to have cap space as well. Maybe they're a team that could use a Kiefer Sherwood. But this is the other important factor. When we as a media are speculating, do your homework and look at these teams. And when you look at the Philadelphia Flyers, there's a team that's pretty deep on the wing. So they like the player, but they just don't see the fit. They don't want to block any of their younger guys that are making that move. So I don't think that there's a shortage of interest in Kiefer Sherwood. But to your point, I think it's a good one. Hey, why wouldn't a San Jose try and get in there early? The San Jose Sharks maybe they're not that far away. They need several pieces. I don't think they're on the cusp of turning the corner and being next year's Anaheim Ducks. But when you've got Will Smith and you've got Macklin Celebrini and you've got some real nice developing assets, why wouldn't you try and throw a Kiefer Sherwood into the mix, or a player like that, just to add right now to give these kids a little bit more push and opportunity to advance?
Yeah, San Jose, one of a number of teams that's playoffs or playoff adjacent, can use goal scoring. Columbus, LA, the Rangers, Philadelphia, Minnesota, amongst them. Getting back to Philadelphia, Dregs, because we had a lot of people tying Rick Tocchet to some of his former players here, if the Canucks are selling off.
Yeah.
What do you know about the Flyers' interest in Canucks players? I guess outside of wingers, if they feel they're pretty good on the wing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why we are connecting any sort of trade speculation between Philadelphia and Vancouver is because of Rick Tocchet and the fact that he would know these men well, the relationships and all of that. As far as your pending unrestricted free agents go, I think Philadelphia feels like they want to see a little bit more from the players that they have, but they are going to have cap space to work with in the offseason. And what is that offseason going to look like, right? We don't entirely know yet. We know that it's not as deep as it could have been, up until very recently when guys started signing. I think the latest was Adrian Kempe, right, with the Los Angeles Kings. So now when you look at that market where Philadelphia was hoping to take advantage of in the offseason, there's some decent pieces, more now on the B level than in the A level. I'd put Alex Tuch still in that A category, but I do think that's the type of game that Danny Briere and Keith Jones and Rick Tocchet are trying to get into, whereby, okay, they've got a little bit more experience under the belt of some of their players that should be ready to take that next step, but they'd like to add a significant piece or two in the near future.
There's a bunch of funny teams right now, isn't there? That I'm curious as to which direction they go. Teams that we expected to be better, but have been maybe much better than we expected. The Ottawas, the Anaheims, the San Jose's of the world. That do they know what they are? Are they going to get overexcited about where they are in the standings and acquire talent this year, or are they going to just and I'm putting Philly in that group too? Or are they just going to sit tight and say we know where we are in our developmental curve and we're just going to stay there and not over invest? I guess.
I would subscribe to the latter, but you're always open as a general manager to the potential of something just flat out landing in your lap.
Yeah.
A scenario that you just didn't foresee. You weren't counting on player X being available, and all of a sudden now that player is available. And by being available, meaning you get that call from a general manager that's somewhat unexpected. And you're like, okay, yeah, I didn't think that guy was going to be available, but here he is. So let's take our swing. And I do think that applies to those teams, Blake. I do. Yeah. How many of us thought that the Anaheim Ducks were going to be the Anaheim Ducks team that we're watching right now? They're just flat out fun to watch. Yeah. And, I'm sure there are games where Pat Verbeek and Joel Quenneville, the head coach, are covering their eyes with some of the stuff that they're witnessing. But, that group finds a way. And you don't hire Joel Quenneville unless you feel like you're that close. And you're thinking back to the Chicago Blackhawks heyday with Kane and Taves and all of that. I don't think that Philadelphia is quite there yet, but they're not that far. Ottawa, for me, is. And I had a conversation with Steve Stales about this the other day, late last week, in fact. And man, I mean, like every market, you want your general manager to be a big game hunter because it's fun to talk about and the scenarios that you can contrive and all of those things. And again, he's open to possibility, but that isn't real for the Ottawa Senators until it becomes real. He doesn't feel like he needs to do that because he's sensitive to making sure that Tim Stützle, as an example, has the ice time required to continue to hone his skills as a real good developing two-way forward. So Ottawa's more in the realm of adding a depth forward and a depth defenseman, and they're more or less back to health now with Brady Tkachuk back in the mix. So again, interested in talking, but nothing burning, front burner anyway.
Those teams that we just talked about have got a lot of young players, so they're the kind of team that could make a big trade if they wanted to for a big Norris Trophy winning kind of defenseman. Should be made available. Patrick Ovina said that's not on the table right now. If you were a betting man, would you say that could change this season, or are you 99% sure they get through this year without dealing with that particular file? Because I think everybody has seen the body language. There's some reports that they even had a chat with him, whether you subscribe to that or not. But it looks weird out there at times. Like we just cannot turn away from the weirdness. And if I'm another GM, I might say that looks like a player that wants out. Maybe we just give Patrick a call. Would you be surprised if the willingness on Alvin changes this season?
No, I wouldn't be surprised. And I would say 99% is high for me.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet with a lower percentage. Mm-hmm. But we're guessing when we're trying to detail what that looks like. And your point is that it's highly unlikely and likely isn't going to happen this season. But hey, let's see where the Vancouver Canucks are in the second half of the regular season. And if it's pretty obvious mathematically they're a non-playoff contender, well, okay, then I think you more or less have to be open to that conversation, don't you? Where Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin and maybe Adam Foote is part of the conversation. You sit down with your captain and you go, okay, we don't want to pressure you. You know what our position is. We want you to be a lifer in Vancouver. We don't want you going anywhere. But if you in your heart know that you're not extending here, and you know that today, let's have that conversation if you're willing to have it. I'm not going to pressure them, because think about it. If you're Tom Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils, and most people still believe that that's ultimately going to be what Quinn wants to do, play with his brothers, Luke and Jack, and the Devils, right? If you're Tom Fitzgerald, can you stomach whatever that return is in season now, even though it's obviously going to tear apart your roster to a point, knowing, though, that you're getting a potential Norris Trophy winner again, right? And those three guys together are going to be so motivated that whatever you're selling the other way to the Vancouver Canucks is going to be enough to do some damage in the playoffs this year. And if you're Fitzgerald and you feel that way, then why wouldn't you do that? Because you're then getting them for at least 3 playoff runs, right? Any team that acquires Quinn Hughes this year prior to the trade deadline gets them for 3 playoff runs. Two.
This one and next.
Sorry, you're right. One more after.
Yep.
Well, that extra playoff push matters. It matters. So we had a quiz question as part of our regional game the other day, and I always hate these questions because, only because the question was, New Jersey aside, who's the next best team, the next likely team to acquire Quinn Hughes? All right. Well, you can't just and so I push back and I'm like, well, I'm a hockey insider. I'm not supposed to take wild guesses here. And that's what you're going to force me to do if you're saying, okay, well, you can't take New Jersey. And so I made a fuss on TV about it, of course, becoming more and more like our good pal Bob McKenzie and pushing back whenever I can. And I said, okay, well, if I have to guess, then my next guess would be Detroit, because I do think if capital IF Quinn leaves, Vancouver leaves the West, then he's headed east in some capacity.
Yeah. Can I take a wild guess?
Sure.
Washington. Because they probably have 2 playoff runs left with Alex Ovechkin. So do everything you can to try and win another while Ovi's there. Have a decent stable of young players and prospects. And it's
Who's coming
out
back?
east.
Connor
Great
McMichael?
question. Yeah, McMichael, Protas. I'm looking at a bunch of their young players.
Everything
we can do
you
this
have.
all day, Dregs. We can go through every roster in the league.
I appreciate what you're saying. I guess I would throw it back at you, though, conversely, and say that the reason they protect McMichael, Protas, sort of is a nice player. Like, he's a 23-year-old kid who has more of a role now because Pierre-Luc Dubois is out long term. They're building and very protective of those young pieces because of the post Alex Ovechkin era.
Right, gotcha.
And that may not be that far away.
And that is fair as well. And of course, many wondering about Carolina as well because they take big swings. And well, I guess we'll talk if they're still hanging tough. The Minnesotas, the Utahs of the world, Montreal as well as the season goes along. Awesome stuff. Thank you, Dregs. Appreciate this. Until next Monday.
Okay, guys, have a great week.